The West Virginia Mountaineers have had a crazy offseason. And in my opinion, I think it's all for the better. Now, West Virginia lost 6 players going into this offseason, 3 into the transfer portal and 3 to graduation, or just guys who ran out of eligibility playing their 5th year of college basketball. And honestly, the 3 guys who left via the transfer portal weren't super impactful for this Mountaineers squad. They didn't get necessarily a ton of minutes. Sure, they could have been good in the future, but they were definitely not impacts right now. West Virginia also brought in 5 new players from the transfer portal, and with that, they've got the 2nd highest rated transfer portal class in all of the country. Now, they're second only to the University of Kansas, but I personally would argue that this is the most impactful transfer class in the country because West Virginia got so much better with this. Now, what will this team look like next year? Who's headed out? Who's coming in? And is this team going to be any good? Well, let's talk about it. Now, first, let's take a look at these 6 players headed out the door for West Virginia, either through the transfer portal or through graduation. First of all, we've got Eric Stevenson, the leading scorer and probably the best player for this Mountaineers squad. He was a terrific playmaker and shooter scorer for this team. He certainly is going to be missed. Next, we've got Emmett Matthews, the kind of 3-4 forward who can do a little bit of everything, can score a little bit, but had some inconsistencies throughout the year. Nonetheless, the Mountaineers are going to miss him as well. Kedrian Johnson was another good ball handler and score off the bounce for this Mountaineers squad. He wasn't, again, the most consistent guy on this team. That was probably Eric Stevenson, but nonetheless, he is going to be missed as well. So those are the 3 guys who are out the door because they simply ran out of eligibility. Now, for the 3 guys who headed out the door via the transfer portal, again, none of them super impactful for this team. However, you could definitely argue that there was a future for each of these 3 guys. Now let's get to the exciting stuff. These guys are the 5 players that are coming in via the transfer portal, and we're going to take a look at them one by one. All right, so these 5 guys are going to be ranked from least impactful to most impactful. We'll work our way up through the 5. However, I think all 5 are going to have an impact for this team. First of all, we got Omar Silverio, the guard out of Manhattan, who never actually played for Manhattan. He transferred just before the start of last season, so he did not get a play. He's played 3 seasons at Hofstra thus far. He had a big role in his last year before he left. Averaged just under 11 points per game. This guy is an absolute shot chucker from beyond the arc. 70% of his shots come from behind the 3-point line. He can be pretty good from there, but he's also very, very streaky. This guy, not much of a playmaker, even though he does play the point guard and sometimes shooting guard spot. But I do think that he can be a consistent source of offense at times from off the bench. I think for this Mountaineers squad, he's going to be an off-the-bench, microwave kind of guy. Maybe he gets hot. Maybe he doesn't. It all depends on the night. Next up, we got Jose Perez from Manhattan as well. He actually did play for Manhattan. In fact, this will be his 4th school in 4 years when he comes to West Virginia. This guy's a bigger guard. He's 6'5", really loves to attack the basket. In his 1 and only year at Manhattan, he was an absolute shot chucker for better or worse. This kid averaged nearly 19 points per game, and he took a lot of shots to do it. Let me tell you right now, he is not a 3-point shooter. Hit just 26% of his threes in his last season of college basketball, which was 2 years ago. But what this kid does is he loves to get downhill, he loves to get fouled, and he loves to attack the basket. He's also a good passer and playmaker. He averaged 4.5 assists per game in his 1 season at Manhattan, and he's a good passer for his size, certainly. In terms of his role, I think this guy might lead the bench unit for Bob Huggins' squad this coming year. I think he can use his size and passing to be a real threat in the pick and roll, attacking the basket, and also facilitating off to his teammates. I think Perez is a huge pickup, especially if he were to lead the bench unit. The third guy we've got is Raekwon Battle, the big guard transferring out of Montana State. Now, this is Battle's third school. He also went to the University of Washington for 2 years. Raekwon is 6'5". He's super athletic, super bouncy, and he can get his shot from almost anywhere on the floor. He had a huge breakout season last year for Montana State. He averaged 18 points per game, led them in scoring, was a pretty efficient lead man option in terms of his scoring role. He's an off-the-bounce scorer for sure. He can definitely get his own shot whenever he needs it. He's good out of the pick and roll and out of isolation. Not much of a facilitator, but he's a heck of a shot maker and scorer. He's also really long, so he could be a really solid threat defensively, guarding 2s and 3s throughout the season. For his role, I think Raekwon's going to come in and start for this team next year. Now, whether it's at the 2 or the 3, I'm not really sure, but I think he will fit into one of those off-guard spots and will be a starter for this Mountaineers squad next fall. The next guy we've got is Kerr Kriisa, the transfer from Arizona. He's spent the last 3 years playing for the Wildcats, and he's carved out a really nice role for himself. Kriisa is definitely a playmaker first when it comes to his ball handling, which I think fits in really well with this Mountaineers squad. He's also a tremendous shooter from the outside, and he's a defensive pest on the perimeter, even when he's got the size disadvantage on his opponent. He had a solid year last year. Again, none of his numbers going to jump off the page at you. He did average 5 assists a game for a very good Arizona team. I love the way he takes that lead guard role at times, even when he's not even remotely the most talented player on the floor. Now, I absolutely see Kerr Kriisa sliding into this starting point guard spot for Bob Huggins and the Mountaineers. I think he's going to be a perfect fit as a guy that doesn't really need to take a lot of shots, but can be very effective in his role. Last but not least, probably the most impactful player of the bunch is Jesse Edwards, the transfer coming out of Syracuse. Edwards was an absolute stud for Syracuse last year. He was clearly their best player on the floor. This kid's got a ton of size, 6'11", 230, still continuing to fill out that frame. He is an athletic big man. He works really well in the pick and roll as the roll man. He's a terrific rim runner, super athletic. You're going to see this guy get alley-oop after alley-oop in a Mountaineer uniform this year. Last year for the Qs, he averaged 14.5 points per game with a double-double, averaging 10 rebounds per game as well, and nearly 3 blocks per contest. This guy can also be a disruptor on the defensive end. He can certainly be a rim protector, which is crucial for the makeup of this team, and I think he clearly slides into that starting 5 spot for this Mountaineers team. I think he's probably your most consistent and frankly best offensive player of this group. I think Jesse Edwards was a huge pickup for Bob Huggins and this Mountaineers squad. All right, so now let's take a look at this roster as a whole after we saw those 5 new guys. Now, right here is this coming year's projected roster unless anything else changes. The guys that I've got highlighted in yellow, those are the 5 that I think are going to be the starters. The 3 transfers that I mentioned, along with Joe Toussaint at one of the guard spots, and then Trey Mitchell as that kind of power forward as well for this team. I think depth-wise, this team looks really solid, especially at the guard spot. You're hoping for, some of those bigs to grow a little bit as well to give Jesse Edwards some depth and allow him to actually get some sort of rest this season. I think the only question mark for this team is depth at the forward spot. I mean, behind Trey Mitchell, there's not a lot of consistent contributors that we've seen from in the past. So we might need to see some growth internally from that spot. Otherwise, I think this is a super deep roster. You've got a lot of really talented ball handlers who had a lot of experience in their past, and I think that's really crucial for this team. I love the way this Mountaineers squad looks right now. Now, the age-old question, will they be any good? ESPN's Joe Lunardi predicts them as a 7 seed right now in his super early bracketology. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this team ends up as a 5 seed. next year in the NCAA tournament. I think you're going to also see this team compete in the Big 12 more than they have in recent years. I think they're going to be a tough team night in, night out. Now, I want to hear your thoughts about this Mountaineers squad. Are you a West Virginia fan, or are you just a college basketball observer? What do you think of their improvements to their roster this year, and what do you think of their outlook? Please comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you're new to the channel and you love college basketball coverage, please consider subscribing down below. We're going to be posting 2 to 3 times per week throughout the summer, giving you all the scoop you need on any changes going on in the transfer portal. We're going to be talking NBA draft stuff, and we're also going to be doing team previews looking into next fall as well. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you in the next one.